Hello everyone, my name is Saad Fazal. Welcome to another video. So as you know, we are working on the MECM series and we will be discussing both Intune and SCCM in this series on various topics. So today I'm making a second video, which you can call it second course as well. So the agenda of today is very simple. Let's recap what we did last time. So in in the first course, what we did, we discussed the prerequisites of this course, what minimum knowledge you need uh, for this to attend for the upcoming courses here. Um, MECM as a high level, build your lab, what is required for building and setting up your lab, and to go through, and we went over the PKI templates, multiple templates for multiple purposes. Um, and then I went over the Azure portal and the licensing as well, like what's required in terms of setting up the MECM from on-premises to the cloud. All right, let's hop on the second course today. So in the second course, what we're gonna do, you're gonna install the primary site. That's called our first SCCM server. Like I already mentioned, I do have the SCCM server installed while I was preparing for this lab, but we're gonna pretend that we're gonna have SCCM server. So I'm gonna go over all the steps, but I'm not going to install another SCCM in this environment. But I will get to the very next phase where you actually hit the install button and that's where you see the SCCM installed. And then once we have the SCCM installed, we'll update the SCCM. I made another video on how to upgrade the SCCM. If you haven't had a chance, go visit my additional videos on YouTube, and you will see how to update the SCCM from baseline version to the latest version. Once we have the SCCM up to date, then we will configure site and site properties, and then we'll configure the distribution point role. All right, let's do it. Let me bring up the server. Okay, so this is my server, SCCM server. So far, what I'm gonna do, I have a site server security group set up where I'm actually adding all the site servers. So if I bring up my Azure Active Directory here. Okay, MECM primary site servers, members. I'm gonna add, make sure to check the object type, computers. Okay, good. So this is a server I'm working on, making sure that this server is a part of MECM security groups. Sorry. And then a couple of things we need to double check before we actually pull the trigger for installation. The first thing first, under the ADSI edit. So be very careful when you play with ADSI edit. That could potentially damage your environment to the point where it's not recoverable. So make sure to work with the Active Directory expert on this. So let's go ADSI edit. So if you're opening this first time, we'll ask you to connect. So hit connect and connect with the default naming context. There are some other contexts as well, but let's go with the default naming context and expand the system. If you haven't installed any SCCM in your environment, you will not see the system management container. In this case, then you will create a container and call it exactly like system management. So once you have that container, since it shows like I have the SCCM installed with the site code AZR that we will be using in this course throughout. Since I have a SCCM installed, so it's showing you a site. If I didn't have it, then I would have created this system management container here. So once you have the system management container created in ADSI edit, you have to delegate the control. Okay. And the delegate control can be here. So that was ADSI edit. And then delegation will be under Active Directory users and computer. So make sure you have the advanced feature enabled. So if you don't, you will not see everything here. So let me enable the advanced feature under the view section, and under the system, you will see the system management container listed here, and you make sure you go through the delegate control next, and then you select the group, which is SCCM site server group I have created. So I'm going to make sure. I'm very bad remembering names. Not this one. Let me see. I think it's MECM, I believe. Yes. So make sure you add the primary site server group here. And if you're working on just one server, add the server here. And okay, create a custom task to delegate, hit next, and then leave this default, the folder, existing folder, blah, blah, and hit next. And here you make sure you have a full control, hit next, and finish. Since I already have this over in under the system management, I'm not gonna do it again. That was from the Active Directory side. Config manager site server itself, you make sure that the same group is added under the local administrator. So this is my SCCM primary site server, which I will be installing SCCM on this, pretending to be installing, but not installing because I have it installed. So MECM, so you make sure you have this enabled as well. If you are working on a remote SQL, make sure you have the same thing added in the local SQL box, as well as the SCCM site servers are added to the SQL application for such as like SQL Management Studio with the sysadmin roles. If you are doing a remote SQL, but if you are keeping the SQL on the same box, which is unlikely, generally it's a lab setup to keep everything in the same box, then I don't need to add anything in the SQL box. That was it. And another thing is extend the schema. So it is important. So SCCM2, so I am installing SCCM 2103, which is a baseline version. And let me see if I can install the Chrome here. Okay, here's the article. So we're working on, so if you look at the baseline, we are working on the baseline version, which is 2103. But the latest one, which just released last month, is in December is 2111. So essentially, we will be on 2111. So let's just start with the baseline version. So I've already gone through the evaluation setup download and downloaded the setup evaluation copy in my C drive here. Let me remove that second. I'll download this thing. Okay, so I already extracted the SCCM 2103 here, but before you do that, you make sure that you have the schema up to date. For updating the schema, you need a schema admin permissions, okay? And you can check the schema. For example, if your Active Directory team requires to go through the change control process, or they need more information, you can open this LDF file. I will tell you what exactly the schema update will do. And let's dig into each folder here. So SCCM setup, SMS setup, bin, x64, I think it's config, yes, LDF. So if you open this one, let's say open with the notepad here, this will tell you what exactly the schema will do. So for example, this is the information, this section as a new attribute for SMS capabilities, new attribute for SMS v4. So this is the directory path. The change type is add. So here you can get more information if they are looking for like what SCCM is required from the schema perspective. So that was a little piece from the documentation perspective, but let's do the actual schema update here. Um, I have already done it, but let's just do it again. So you can find the schema file here, which is called exe this file, and if you bring up the command prompt, make sure you are the schema admin when you run this. Since I'm using my administrator account, and that's also a schema admin, so let's first go to this location. Right. So when you hit, perfect. So it says the schema is updated. Perfect. So that's successfully updated. Okay. So now so just to recap what we did, we created a site server security group, added in a ADSI, sorry, Active Directory users and computers under the system management container. How did we make sure that we have a system management container? ADSI edit. So under the ADSI edit, if there is no container exists, then you make sure you create a new container. Another thing what we did here is added the site servers in the local admin groups for every site and server box here under the local administrators. The next thing what we did here is updated the Active Directory schema. Another thing, so now let's go for the SCCM. I'm not going to install the SQL on this box because like I already told you, I have the SCCM server installed. But let's just go through the prerequisite checker. So, so this is a great utility for running the SCCM prerequisites. If you download this file here, it's sitting at the GitHub. I'll extract this. Okay, perfect. So when I launch this utility here, it's a very nice utility. I love it. So one-stop shop. Under the drop down, you see primary site, central administration, and secondary site. Since it's our primary site, so I'll go ahead and select primary site and hit install. It will look for the features if they are already installed. If not, it will start installing. All right, so I waited about like 5 minutes or so. It got completed. So as you can see that the primary site installation, not site installation, the prerequisites have been completed, and I didn't have to manually install every feature either using PowerShell or through the server GUI. This utility is a magic. So um, so the next step is there are some other software pieces that are not a part of this utility, unfortunately. The one is Windows Assessment Kit, Assessment and Deployment Kit. So let's do that as well. And while we are here, we need to install this Windows PE add-on for Config Manager as well. So let's start with the ADK first. So I downloaded the ADK here. Okay, hit next. Okay, so the only thing which I need for my lab is, I'm gonna uncheck all of this, USMT and the deployment tools. The rest are just not required for me to proceed with my lab. So I'm gonna hit install here. Okay, perfect. So that got installed. So the next thing is the Windows PE add-on for the Windows ADK. So I'm gonna click on this link. It's downloaded. Hit next. Accept. Okay. That's the only feature. It's estimated disk space required. Oh boy. It's required at least 6. Okay, so that's a disk space required, a disk available. Well, let's see how it goes. Let me check the size of the disk as well. Okay, so I have 38.5 left. Yeah, started to shrink. That's okay. Okay, perfect. So that got downloaded. It took around like 6 or 5, yeah, around 6 gig of space on my disk. So that was it from the prerequisite part. So now let's start the installation for config-man. So hit splash. It's gonna bring up the setup console for you. So I don't have a SQL install on this block and I don't want to install SQL. So let's just go over the process so I can show you the options. And we are not going to install the config-man on this server, but taking you to the point where you are comfortable installing by yourself in either in your lab or maybe dev environment. Hit next. Okay, so I highly recommend do not use this use typical installation option. Leave it unchecked and go with the install configuration manager primary side unless you are using a central administration side. Okay, so since this is my primary side, I'm gonna leave it on evaluation. Oh, accept, and accept here. Okay, here. So it will download the cab files. Since it's the first time I'm running on this box, so I'll just give it a location, call it like C config man cab files. Hit next. I probably have to create a folder first. Oh, I copied the wrong thing. Second. Okay. When I hit next, it's going to download around 40 or so, 49 now. All right, so the files have been downloaded. So here's the wizard for the language selection. So I'm planning to keep my MECM in English language only. So I'm gonna go with the default. That was for the server side, and that's for the client side. So this is the important step. If you have a multiple location and you're planning to have a clients in a multiple languages, then this is the time to install the language packs here. So hit next. Site code, super important. If you site code must be and has to be unique. So even though if you use the site code, let's say like in past, and you demoted or decommissioned that SCCM completely, remove all the traces, blah, blah, blah. I would still recommend you not to use the same site code and go with a different one. So let's go with the AZR, pretend that we're going to use this AZR. I already have the same site code created. Azure, we'll call it Azure Lab Academy. Okay, I'm gonna go with the default location. Generally, it's not, I do not recommend the default location if you have the E drive or some additional drives. Um, Install it on a non-OS hosting drive. Leave the checkbox there, install the configuration manager console, and hit next. Um, we are not going to join this site to an existing hierarchy. For example, I do not have a central administration site where under, so I'm not going to add additional sites under the umbrella of CAS, which is central administration site. Instead, I'm actually installing a brand new primary site. So I'm going to go with the primary site standalone option over there. So it's just a little warning here. Do you want to continue? Yes. Important piece, SQL. So if you have a SQL, if you're working on your lab environment, most likely you're going to keep the SQL on the same box. So no changes required. Don't have to provide the instance. It will create the site name underscore CM underscore site name. This is the database it will automatically create in your SQL. But if you are working, if you have a remote SQL, so the most likely you have to provide the broker port, which could be whatever the port you have. So that could be 1433, just like that. And that's going to be a remote SQL server name. Okay. And in some cases, you probably have to provide the instance as well. But if you only have the one SQL, one SCCM server, then you can go with the default instance. It will pick up my SQL server. That's the default name of the instance. But if you intentionally rename the instance name on your SQL, then make sure to provide the instance name here. Since I don't have a broker port, I don't even have a SQL install on this block. I'll just go with the next. Most likely, let's see if it goes out there. All right, so interestingly, what I found out, I was getting little error passing this point. So what I did, just just to show you guys here, like to all the steps, I came up with a workaround. So I installed another SQL instance on my remote SQL server because because I don't have to install the whole SQL installation on this box. So I installed an additional SQL instance called MS SQL Server 02, made some changes under the SQL configuration manager. Okay. And we'll add the broker port here. Make sure to have this port is set to static, not dynamic. And I clear all the dynamic ports. And one more thing what I did, I changed the site code as well to make sure I have a uniqueness here. So when I hit next, perfect. So I pass this stage here. When I hit next, this SMS provider that's actually uh, required for making a connection from a SCCM server to this SQL. So you can either keep it on SQL server or you can keep it on the site server. So I'm just going to keep it on the site server here when I hit next. This is an important piece. If you are not very much concerned on the security while you do not have a client available, because this is the very early stage, you are going through a installation process. Check with your security team. If they're fine, I highly recommend having a PKI in the first place. If you do not have a PKI, go with the HTTP method here. If you go with the default HTTPS method, it's secure, but your client will not communicate if you do not have a valid PKI set up in your environment. If you know how to set up, if you don't know how to set up a PKI, I made a course number 1 on that. with the prerequisites and PKI, please make sure to visit that video as well. So when you click on configure the communication method on each side, I'm going to go with the HTTP method, which is simpler, but essentially we're going to flip from HTTP to HTTPS. It's up to your choice if you wanted to keep them MP and the DPs on the same server. I do not recommend generally, but since it's a lab environment, we'll just keep everything on the same box. And you see that the communication method is HTTP, not HTTPS. Hit next, next, and that's just for connecting, just to get the updates. So I will leave it default, this one, and hit next. And this is my summary, what I did. When you hit next here, it's going to run through the prerequisite check. Obviously, it's going to get filled. And because we are not proceeding with the installation process, but this is the very last step. This is where you actually find all the missing prerequisites. Since I don't have a SQL install on this box, and site server administrative rights as well. So site server computer account administrative rights. So that's another prerequisite got filled. Let's see what other prerequisites. Pretty much prerequisites are the SQL based. This shouldn't be failed because the reason it's failing, I have to restart the server after I added the SQL group. Sorry, the site server group to the local admin. Let me see if I added that. Yes, I did add that. I guess I just have to restart the server, and then after that I should be. So if you look at the field, so warning ones, you can ignore that. And the missing ones are SQL. This is pretty legit because I don't have a SQL installed on this box and the site server. So technically only one failed. So the rest we already gone through the prerequisites. So let me go ahead and once it's installed, pretending to be it's installed, then we're going to switch back to the AZR side, and then we'll continue from there. All right, guys, so back to the SCCM server. So SCCM got installed. So we started with the baseline version 2103, and I upgraded from 2103 to 2107 and then 2111. So we are up to date. I see one hotfix available. When I hit the check for updates here, hotfix is available. I passed the prerequisite checks here. So it's under the administration, updates, and servicing. So when you click on show status here, let's see what are the warnings over there. Show status. That's okay. So completed with recommends latest version of 4.8. So that's all right. So I'm gonna go ahead and hit install here. This hotfix. Okay. Hit next. Close. All right. So right here, so you can see that the hotfix got installed here. So let's check the show status. Yes, installation is completed. It's on the post installation piece. So while it's on post installation piece, let's discuss the second module of this course, number 2. So the second module for course number 2 is configure site and site system properties. So now, since we have a config menu up and running, we're going to explore the site properties here to discuss what options are available for site to make sure that our clients can communicate. Explore site system role properties. We'll see like what site system roles are available for the site. Deploy site system role will deploy a couple of roles, for example, MPs and DPs. Even though I have the MPs and DP installed, but I will show you how to install the role. We're going to configure the boundaries and the boundary groups. So boundaries basically like a container where you actually define the conditions that what you wanted to discover, and then behind the boundaries we make sure that the discovery methods are enabled. So we have a config man offer discovery methods. It can be a user discovery, group discovery. It's basically to authorize config man to reach out to your Active Directory and pull the data and store the database record, store the records in the config manager database. And we're gonna then publish the site data to Active Directory. I'll show you how to publish the site, and then we'll explore discover devices and users. So let's wait for a few more minutes. This hotfix gets installed, and then we'll move on to the second module. All right, so there are multiple layers of settings available for the site itself. So we're just gonna go over the top level settings, which are directly available in the properties of the site. So when I open up the property here under administration, site configuration, sites, so let's have a quick look here. So this shows the version of my config man and the build number and the site server name. So that's my site server name, SCCM01, install directory. So these are the things, like sometimes very helpful when you do the troubleshooting. And wake on LAN, generally I personally don't enable for my lab purposes, but if you wanted to send a wake up messages to your um, computer fleets, you can use the wake on LAN feature here. If you're using unicast, that's fine. If you're using client notification channel, make sure the ports are checked for the client notification here. Under the port section, no changes required. Just leave it default. I generally don't play around with the port settings here. Sender, uh, how configuration manager will send and receive the data among the sites. Since I have only one site available, so I'm going to leave it default. But if you have multiple sites available, make sure it's set up appropriately. Publishing, this is to publish your config man site in your Active Directory. So if I go to ADSI edit, I should be able to see my site published in ADSI edit. If I unpublish it, it's gonna remove the site automatically. No need to do anything from the ADSI edit. No need to delete. It will automatically delete it. Communication security, most important tab under the site setting. This is how your clients uh, will communicate to the MPs and DPs. So right now, so there are three modes. The one is the most secure one, HTTPS. When you select HTTPS, you need a PKI on that. I do have a PKI set up, so I can just flip it over to HTTPS, but I wanted to show you. The second method is just the HTTP, no, which is not secure. But when you install the config man and there's nothing really inside, um, generally I go with the HTTP, but check with the security if they're okay with that. Otherwise, during the installation, you have an opportunity to select HTTPS only, even though the default installation radio button is checked to HTTPS only. The third option is Enhanced HTTP. Enhanced HTTP is like config man become the PKI, and it does provide the certificate. So config manager actually generates a certificate for the client. So right now I'm enhanced HTTP because this option is enhanced HTTP. So I check this option. I I have a root CA as well, so I exported the root CA. So what I did here, I just set the roots, click on set, export the root CA. I'll provide the root CA here. So I added my local Active Directory root certificate
to the config here. So right now I'm on enhanced HTTP, but later on we're gonna switch it over to the HTTPS only. Alerts, very important. Sometimes if you run out of disk or something happens to the server itself, it generates alerts. So there is a retention range and the frequency of the alert, how frequent you want it to have, and what kind of alert you want it. This is not the alert basically coming from the end users or from the computer. It's the server itself for config man. There's a deployment verification. You can uh, I generally leave it default, but you feel free to read the description here and set up accordingly. Security, I added, actually by default the account gets added as an full permission when you enable um, any security roles. For example, I think this guy is the full administrator as well. Oh, actually, it's a read-only administrator. This one is the full. So anything you play around under the RBAC or any role assignment will show up here. Signing and encryption, I generally leave it default, but if you want to use the encryption checked here, you can do that. And service windows is actually the updating and the patching for the config man. So that was just the properties under the site, but we do have some additional features available. For example, client settings, right? Under the client settings, oops, let me go back in there. Client settings, you have client push installation settings, you have a software update um, based client installation, you have hierarchy settings. So we have to explore bit by bit. So far we just explored the properties available and the settings available inside the site. All right, guys. So let's get back to the SCCM server. And so we're going to review what we have here, and we're going to install the SCCM site server. So I'm under the administration here, and if I explore here, so this is my primary site, um, which is here. SCCM01 has a bunch of roles. So when you install the site, it comes with the default roles. So for example, component server, site system server. So what we going to do here is instead of adding a role in our existing site, we're creating a new site system server here. So I have the server, but before I do that, let me see if I can run a quick utility over there. I have a file server 01. The one thing what I would do here is just in case, if in case we need to use a system account, I would add MECM primary security groups here. Okay, that's pretty much it. Let's get back to SCCM server, create a site system, and another thing I want to show you here is under the security. And if you look at the account section, these are your accounts, the admin accounts. So for example, since I'm using my domain admin account to install SCCM, it logged my account as an admin account here under the account section. So if you ever choose account and later you decide to reset the password in your Active Directory, you make sure you come back here and set the correct password here. Because when you install the services using as an account, and when you change the password, there are some services those are dependent with Active Directory that they are no longer able to authenticate. As a result, they stop working. So it is important to fix the password here. So let's get back to the site here, and we're gonna add a new site server. So now, just FYI, I have to, please ignore the CMG one at the moment. We're gonna recreate later from the scratch in our upcoming modules. So create site system server. I'm gonna choose the file server. Okay, so this is the place you can either use the same account or use the computer account. Even though I added the security group in a local admin, but let me try this method here. Existing account, Azure admin, the same account I'm going to use during my site system. So, okay, site code. Oh, yes, you're right. Forgot to add the site code. Next. Okay, I will leave it default. Let's make this server MP and DP. So management point and distribution point. I'm not gonna go into each and every setting, so we're just gonna leave it default. But later when we visit the HTTPS settings, we're gonna get back here and we'll figure out. But let's keep it simple. So I'll call it, let's say like file server MP action point. Okay. And let's keep this like install IS if required by the config man. Other than that, yeah, I'm not interested in any other feature, at least for my lab, but feel free to test each feature here. When I hit next, let's go with HTTP for now. Um, I have the HTTPS enable as well. Let me see. Actually, let's go with HTTP for now. We're gonna get back here and we'll change it because we have to import the certificate and other stuff anyway. So hit next. Drive setting, that's okay. I'm okay with that. I'm gonna keep the primary content automatic because I only have one drive over there. But if you have multiple drives on distribution point, make sure you select the right one, generally the first option and the third option. This is not my pool DP, so I'm gonna leave it default. That's my actual DP. Um, I'm not going to enable Pixie boot here, so I'm gonna hit next. Multicast, no. Validate content, I don't have to validate content for now. Um, but if you have a lot of content and you want to go through the validation process, you can enable it. Boundary groups, let's see if I have any boundaries. Um, since I haven't gone through the boundary thing, but I'm just gonna leave it default. So I have to show you what boundary is. Um, so hit next and leave it. Okay, so it was for the DP. Now I'm working on MP, so I'm gonna leave the MP on HTTP as well. Uh, Default, next. Okay, perfect. You can go to monitoring and see the site components here, site server status, and that's the content status. Okay, here. So under the system status, when you expand the component status, you'll be able to see the component status. So right now it says file server, so I'm just gonna, it's gonna refresh, provide some more information. Let me see where did it go. So here, currently it's showing unknown. That's okay. So while it's being installed or in the process of installation, I'm gonna show you how to create the boundaries. All right, so let's discuss the boundaries here. Um, so the purpose of the boundaries is to isolate your network and devices. It could be many reasons. For example, like you have multiple ranges, multiple locations. You want to serve those locations by specific DP, specific MP, or maybe from the RBAC perspective. So we're going to discuss two things here, the boundaries and the boundary groups. So boundaries is actually the logical boundary in config man where you can specify your requirement and separate those by either subnet or IP ranges, so you have them separated. Um, Boundary group is like more than one boundary becomes the boundary group. So simple as that. So I have some boundaries created for my environment here. So if you see here, I have like, so let's go over each of the boundary here. So I have this subnet, which is pretty much covering like entire 256 addresses. I'm using like 20/24, and I'm going by the subnet ID here. Um, the type of the boundary could be like Active Directory site. That's going to cover like entire site, IP ranges. That's the most common one, and the subnet one. That's the first boundary I have. Um, the another one is also by the subnet, so nothing different. And the third one is the subnet too. I have the Active Directory site as well. That's actually maybe pretty much like a duplication, but just to show you how to create the boundary here. So if you go like, give it the name, for example, like whatever, like West region, okay, and let's go by IP ranges and provide IP ranges 192, 168, 10.50, 192, 168, 10.100. Okay, so that's the West region. We're not going to discuss the boundary groups now, but we'll revisit this window later. So that's the West region. I'll hit apply. I don't have any devices to be discovered in this IP range, so that's just for the demo purposes. Um, I'll create another boundary. I'll call it East region. I'll give it a subnet 192.168.15.50. Sorry, 50. And sorry, let's go with the IP range here. My bad. 192.168.15.50. 192.168.15.100. Okay, so East region, and I will create another boundary called like Central region. Okay, we'll go by the IP range as well. 192.168.20.50, 192.168.20.100. Okay, perfect. So I got three different boundaries. These three are active ones because my machines are on these subnets here. So now let's go for a boundary group. So boundary groups kind of important, but if you don't have boundary group, that's fine as well. But let's say like site, let me just rename this. So site AZR. So for example, I'm calling this thing as a site boundary group. Site boundary group. Okay, let's do the numbering 0, 1. Okay, so what I'm doing here is when you create the boundary group, you add multiple boundaries. So I'm actually adding 10 network boundaries that I have 10 network boundaries. Okay, and those are part of this boundary group. It's called site boundary group. Okay, so I will, it's called AZR site boundary group. Okay, that's fine. And under the reference, it is important to to make sure that it is assigned to the right primary site. And if you have a more than one primary site server, it's going to show up. For example, we just created another one which is called file server as a primary site server, but I'm not going to add this. Let's add the file server as well. No problem. Um, Perfect. So that's one. And let's we're not going to work on CMG now, but let's do these two here. Relationship, in case fallback relationship, for example, the computer reaching out to the boundary group that's not responding, so you can add the fallback here. These are just these other options. I'm not going to go over into this, and that's the security. So hit apply. Okay, so we have the one site boundary. Let's create another boundary group just to show you how does it work. So 02 and call it like site boundary group AZR site code. So number 2, and you can add multiple site, for example, like AZR called by regions, okay, and you add all 3 regions in this thing. Under the reference, it is important. So if you discover, so if any devices are discovered, that's going to reach out to this site server. So I'm going to go with SCCM and this one as well. Okay, hit apply. Perfect. So I got two boundary groups, and if you go to the boundaries here, and if you pick up one of the boundary, for example, this one, the West region, go to properties here, you will see the site system, which is good, and you will see the boundary group, which is, we just added the by regions boundary group 02. So that's the purpose of boundary groups. The next topic here is the discovery method. So discovery method, so config-man has 6 discovery methods. So I didn't enable the network discovery. When you install it, they're disabled. You have to enable it. I believe the heartbeat one is enabled already. I'm not sure, but I have to check. Uh, but Active Directory forest discovery, if you wanted to enable forest discovery, so then just go one by one each. So enable, it's very simple and self-explanatory. Enable Active Directory forest discovery here, automatically create Active Directory site boundaries when they're discovered, automatically create IP addresses, blah, blah, and run every week. So let's say like, I would say just run in days because my lab. So hit OK, and you can manually run it anyway. So you can run this discovery method. This is going to discover your group. The first one was going to discover your forest. Actually, the forest one shouldn't be that quick. So I would say once a week is fine. For the group discovery, um, when you hit enable, then you add what is the location you want to discover. So for example, you want to go by the location. You would, for example, like my groups are sitting under, so I have different group hierarchy under different domains. So for example, each domain has a group section. So I would go with the global one here, and we'll call it like Azure Lab Academy Global. Okay, use the site server's computer account. You can use that, or you can specify the account which you have. So generally my account is the same account is for the site server anyway. So I'm gonna add this one here, and if you look at the location here, the first one which was previously set up, it was the same. So it was set up on Azure Cloud as well. But the description wasn't that good, so I just added the description. So what I'm gonna do, I'll remove this one, delete this one, and we'll edit the description. Azure Lab Academy Global. group discovery. Okay, perfect. And polling schedule is just like how frequent you want to run the delta. I would say like delta screen interval 5 minutes. That's good. And there are some options here. So that's hit apply. Perfect. You can just run a discovery here. So it's going to pull the latest version of the groups in your config man. And Active Directory System Discovery, it's going to discover the devices. So it's the same concept, enable, and then you choose the location, which is the LDAP location. So I'm actually choosing the cloud and the parent location here. Perfect, hit cancel. Um, polling schedule is 5 minutes, it's good. And I'm not selecting any specific attributes or not removing any attributes. So it's gonna discover all the attributes of the device. So hit OK. I'm gonna run this discovery here as well. And it is important to see like which, if you have a multiple sites under the multiple forests, so you make sure you're pulling from the right site code. And the user discovery as well, it's the same concept here. So I'm actually pulling everything from the top hierarchy. And polling schedule 5 minutes as well. I'm gonna run this one here, run full discovery, yes, and then heartbeat. That's something I'm gonna enable for a week, and that's just a one-click enablement. That was this discovery methods here. All right, so the last topic of, not the last, but the last topic of this module um, is to make sure our site is published. So there are two places where you can see if your site is published. So publishing a site is kind of like if you have a dev and prod environment, make sure I recommend that not to publish the dev environment in your AD, but only publish the prod environment. So the first place to look at here is under the site itself. Go to properties and publishing, and indeed I am publishing a site here, so which is AZR site code, and it's enabled. Another place to look at here is the Active Directory forest location. When you go in here under the administration Active Directory forest and look for the forest you're working on, I'm working on Azure Cloud.local. Under the publishing, you see the site is published here. If you remember earlier, I showed you what that means is. So if you go to the ADSI edit, refresh here, under the default naming context, under the system management, indeed, I'm actually publishing my sites here, which is AZR SCCM01. The one thing what I would do, I haven't done it. So if you are planning to add more sites, you make sure that that computer account is listed here with the full control. So if you go under the system management properties, advanced security and advanced, you make sure that the computer is listed. In my case, it was SCCM01. I don't see the file server. Let's see if I do. No, I don't see that. So just to do that, you can do it under the Active Directory users and computer as well, but to delegate the permission. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna add, since I have the security group set up for all my primary site servers, DPs and MPs, I will just add my file server in that security group here. Where's my group? Right there. I'll add the file server as well. Object type would be computer. Okay, file 01, done. Properties, security, making sure I have MECM primary site. Yes, it is there. So that's That's for publishing sites. That's a prerequisite. Make sure that computer which you're going to add as a primary site is a part of the system management container with the full control. All right, so the next thing is, as I promised, I'm going to show you how to enable the HTTPS method to communicate your clients and PHDPs to the site servers, site system. Um, before that, I have already repeated multiple times, you have to have a PKI set up, but just in case, just to give you a high level of what exactly needs to be set up for HTTPS communication, I have my OneNote here. We need 4 templates for the entire lab here, but for the template which we are concerned about is the workstation authentication template that we will start automatically enroll desktop and Active Directory domain. So the purpose of this template is to issue a certificate to these computers that can be trusted by the config to deploy agents and communicate over HTTPS. So just a high level, there are 2 web server duplicate templates and 2 the client workstation duplicate template. So the one which we are working on, the client workstation duplicate, is the client authentication certificate here. So if I show you here, finally you will see something like this. This is your final stuff here. So 2 web SCCM server, 1 with the private key, and 2 SCCM workstation authentication server, and 1 with the private key. I'm not going to go over the entire step again. If you haven't had a chance to look into my PKI lab, go check my course number 1 for this series, where I actually demonstrated how to enable these templates in your PKI. So once we have those templates set up, uh, there is the manual way to enroll the certificate, enroll the computer with that certificate, which is if it's a server, you do it like SCCM web server. If it's just a workstation, so you can enable the auto enroll GPO under the Active Directory GPMC. And like I said, I have the GPO enabled. I'll show you how to do it real quick. 1 second. So it's under here, GPMC. When I go to my group policy object, this is a policy. I enable it. So enroll SCCM workstation templates. If you hit edit here, the settings are, let me check. Computer configuration, Windows settings, public key policies. So computer configuration, Windows settings, security policies, public key policies, and certificate services client. I think that's the one. Yes, so it is enabled. So I have it enabled. That means like any workstation that's going to join to my local domain will retrieve the certificate automatically. And how do we check this? So let's hop on to one of my domain join client here. For example, this one, hybrid Azure AD join machine. Okay, so I am under one of my domain join machine that is technically hybrid Azure AD join. So if you go under the local computers, I have this certificate and issued by my PKI, which is Hyper-V host, is also my PKI machine here. So that's good. So I have the certificate here. Let's quickly, and I should have the root cert as well. Yes, I do have a root cert as well. So this machine looks good, and yeah, not under the current user, but under the machine. So if you go to the cert LM local machine, not this one, this one, cert LM.msc, that's gonna bring up that under the personal, you will see the certificate listed here.
So that's one thing. Another, since we are checking the certificate, let's check for the file server as well, because that's our new MP and DP server. Yep, so it has a cert as well. Perfect, looks good. CCM workstation, good, very good. It has some other certificate as well, so which we can delete it later. I was doing my testing. So we have what we needed. So let's enable the HTTPS method now. Go to administration, site. That's the first thing where you want to enable this. Properties, communication and security, flip it over to HTTPS only. And if you look at the bottom, we need a root cert as well. So if you click on set here and click on this, looks like a sun thing. You can export the root cert. If you don't know how to export the root cert, it's pretty easy. You just let me show you real quick. So if you go to the PKI here, Altus, second, here it is. So PKI, you can go to properties and go to, this is your root cert. You click on view cert, go to details, copy to file, next, export. This is the will export the root cert. Never export root cert with a private key. It shouldn't come with a private key. So that's the way how to export the root cert. Let's get back to CCM. So I already added my root cert here. It's a specified. So I'm gonna flip it over to HTTPS communication only. Hit apply and hit OK. I'm gonna do the same thing for my MPs and DPs as well. So let's start with this one should have been taken care of, but let's double check. Under communication, yes, HTTPS, that's good. Distribution point, management point, HTTPS, that's okay. Allow internet connection. Mobile device and computer, we don't need that, honestly. Okay, and then let's look at the new server, the one which we installed. Let's go to the properties here. Under the DP properties. Communication, yes, it is set to HTTPS automatically. That's good. Okay, good. And same thing for MP. So, so the rule of thumb is you have to have a valid PKI setup, and the computer that those are communicating to the primary site server should have the certificate generated under computer cert store. All right, guys. So the final topic of the day is the distribution point, and after that we will wrap up this video. So let's visit what we have deployed so far under administration and site server. So please ignore this one. This is a cloud DP. I'm gonna redeploy this thing from scratch. So far I made this SCCM01, which is also my primary server, a DP server as well, and I install additional DP/MP, which is file server 01. So let's quickly visit the properties, and there is another place you can see the distribution point. So under administration, the first thing is you can see from the roles. If you have lot of roles and you don't want to see over there and you have a lot of DPs, so you can just directly go into the DPs, and whatever is DP will be listed here. So these are to my on-premises DP, and this one is cloud. So let's first discuss the distribution point group. So distribution point group is nothing, just like a group to hold multiple DPs. So you can create as many groups as you want. So for example, like um, DP, for example, like DP group 01, and then you can add the members. So when you hit members, it's going to show you the members of the DP. So for example, I'm going to give it this one, these two members, right? And then under the collection, you can set up if you have any collection. So I do have some collections. Um, so for example, I would say like, let's go with the root. Okay, it's gonna have all of my clients. Okay, so that's my DP01. I will call it on premise. Okay, and in the collection, yeah, that's fine. Test collection Windows Hello for Business. Hit OK. Cancel. Sorry. Yep. So on premises. Second one is, let's create DP group 02 cloud. You can add the cloud DP here, and collection, it's fine. Okay. So the idea is you can have as many group as you want. If you have multiple DPs, that's just a good way to manage the DPs, to put them in a group. You can either name it by region or by location, whatever is best convenient for you. That's one thing regarding the DP. Let's go to the DP itself. So distribution point here is, its distribution point is actually like centralized repository where config-man actually dump the data, and it could be application packages, depend what you're sending to the DP. And then from the DP, it becomes, it gets distributed over to the clients. So let's check the properties of this DP here. Let's go under the site, DP role, properties. Okay, so I'm not utilizing all the features here, but just to make sure, it's best practice is to keep the same settings across all the DPs. Otherwise, you'll get surprises unless you intentionally make some differences in the settings for different regions. But I have seen most of the time that all the DPs are set up exactly the same. So I'm using in branch cache, which is gonna cache my so I have to read more about this feature, and I'll provide more details on this. So these four features, these are like delivery optimization related features when you can distribute the content to make sure that it does not burden on your network. So things like that could be like a peer-to-peer cache, or um, I'm gonna just dig into it a little bit more. But for now, for this lab purposes, I'm just enabling the branch cache here. Under communication, I'm using HTTPS method. I'm gonna disallow the mobile devices here. Um, I'm using my cert from the PKI with the private key, but you can use the self-signed certificate as well. Not using Pixie, actually it's enabled, but I can disable this Pixie. I don't need it. Multicast, not sure why it's enabled. Okay, I'll just leave it disabled here. Okay, so group relationship. So um, it is actually looking for the DP group. If you have multiple DPs and you want to add multiple DPs for the group. So if you go in here, so I created like two groups. It automatically added here on premises and not the cloud one. Content, the one you can every often you'll have to come here and see like if the content is not being distributed, you will first validate that,
and if it's giving you a green check marks and it's become distributed, you can check under the monitoring. If not, then you have to redistribute it. Redistribute means it's going to start from the scratch and start distributing the package over to the DP. You mean config manager is going to distribute the package from config manager to the distribution point. Content validation, it's up to you. You can enable this. In my lab, I'm not enabling it. Boundary groups important, like where the package is going to be. So we already created a bunch of boundary groups. I added these boundary groups here. I don't have more, so I added all three of your boundary groups. Okay, I'm gonna hit apply, and okay, I'm gonna do the same settings for the other DP just to make sure we have a unique set of settings. So enable communication, HTTPS, uncheck this box. I'm gonna leave it for this one, self-sign, no issues. Pixie disable, multicast disable, on-premises group. I'm gonna add this, no, not this one as well. Content, so I have content. Validation is disabled. Boundary groups, yes, I have all the boundary groups. I'm gonna add this one as well just in case. I don't need a schedule for this one, and it's not a pull DP, and the rate limit. If you need to control the throttling, you can do that. So apply, okay. So those were the properties, like a basic properties of the distribution point rule. And now we're going to distribute the content to see how does it look like. Okay, so I am checking the monitoring status. So you can check the monitoring status under uh, the monitoring tab for distribution points. Before I actually get to the actual distribution, I wanted to show you a few things. The one is when you make a server a distribution point, a few things happen. So let's go to assets and compliance. So I do have the agents deploy. I'm gonna go over real quick after this topic for the agent deployment method, and then we're gonna wrap up this video. For my distribution point, that is, let me see, because I just restarted this server. Let me see, 1 second. Okay, so the server is back up and running. I'll go ahead and start remote control. Okay. So one of my distribution point here. So when you make the server distribution point, a few things happen. The one is whatever the drive you chose during the distribution point creation, it creates a CCM content library, and it creates three default folders: data library, file library, and package library. And it has some dummy data in there. So that's one thing. This server has an agent installed. That's why I was able to RDP to this server. And if I show you here real quick, control panel, go to control panel, config manager, you can see that this DP is contacted to my primary site server, which is a CCM01, certificate type PKI, call management capabilities, call management disable, currently intranet, site code is AZR, blah, blah. So that means this machine is healthy and talking to config man. So let's get back to the config man over there, and let's go to the monitoring status first. Let's see, because this thing will take some time to turn, because right now it's showing in progress. But when I say like, what's the reason of giving me in progress? If I go to details here, it says restart my require, which that I already did, but it's gonna take some time to turn into green. But few things to show you here under monitoring. So let's go to the software library first and distribute some content. So distribute some content under application management. I don't have any application packages right now, so I can't deploy it, but there are some default packages when you install config man, they come with the legacy client and the USMT tool. So for example, this one config manager client, we can distribute this package. So simply go to the software library, expand the application management, go to packages and distribute content. When you distribute content here and add the distribution point. So I'm gonna just add the distribution point group, and I have the on-premises group all distributed to both, and next, done. So you can see the content status here. This is very useful. So when you, it's in the bottom. So if I go one step back, so it's actually under the monitoring, and it's under configuration manager client package. It's under content status basically, and I will show you like a view status. When you click on view status, it will tell you like if it's success or failure, in progress, no error, no unknown, and successfully deployed uh, to this one. Okay. It has two members, so it's showing two members. Okay, for this one, file server one. Okay, the package. Okay, beautiful. So this one has success as well. Perfect. This is good. So here, this is very useful under the monitoring. You can come here under the distribution point status and check since I deployed on the distribution group. So it was showing me the two members over there because I have two DPs there. So this is how you distribute the package. There are some logs, which called dist manager log in the config man. You can check the real-time progress if the package is being deployed or not. The last thing before we wrap up the video here is the client settings. So if you go to the administration, client settings are important. You can have multiple client settings. So if I just want to quickly go over here. So these are the options available for client settings. For example, like background bits, I don't have it enabled. Client cache settings, I left a default. Client policy interval, 5 minutes. Cloud services, for now, I'm just gonna leave it default. Once we enable cloud services, we're gonna revisit this. Compliance settings, default, so things like that. So I'm just gonna go, important ones are, for example, like the remote tools, right? The remote. Okay, so for client settings, under the client settings, remote tools, here are some useful settings. If you wanted to create multiple policies, assign it for your, for example, like help desk, so you may want to check these ones, for example, full control, beginning and end session, things like that. So I just made a slight change here, and I'm using full control because it's my lab. Software center, you want to um, give it a name. So for example, under computer, it was somewhere, you may want to, let me quickly check. Here, so under computer agent, this is very important. Like I'm giving it a name. When my user launch the SCCM Software Center, so they will see the display name under the in the Software Center.